Deadly Assault resetted a few days ago, and this might be one of the hottest one for most players. I don't know, like I've seen a lot of players going around and asking for help, especially against Typhoon Destroyer, which mechanically speaking, it's one of the hottest boss in this rotation. But I decided to challenge myself and clear only using 2 units on every single one of these bosses, and as you can see, I managed to get like 3 stars on every single one of them. It's not hard, you know. Jokes aside, I know what you're probably thinking, oh, but you're using Miyabi on the first one, that's not too free to play, you know, and I agree, but I also managed to clear using Piper and Lucy and got like 15,000 points, I think. I can't remember, you're going to see on your screen, but anyway, if you're only looking for the polychrome rewards, then you need to average 2 stars on every single one of this stage. So Piper and Lucy can still clear on 2 stars, assuming you have like a good build, mindscapes and things like this. I also managed to get 3 stars on Typhoon Destroyer using Harumasa and MB. My Harumasa is Mindscape 0, by the way, and I don't have his signature. And for Marionettes, this one is insanely good. Almost impossible, by the way. I barely got like 3 stars, as you can see. It was super hard. It took me like 5 hours or so to get this 3-star clear. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, and while also showcasing the gameplay in the background. So you can also try to hit 2 stars, get all the polychrome rewards for your account, even if you are in a more free-to-play scenario. Okay, so first things first, if you are free to play, you don't need to get like 3 stars. Only focus on getting 2 stars on every single one of these boss fights, because going 3 stars is only going to give you Denny's. Okay, you don't need to clear with 3 stars. So starting with Dead End Butcher. Dead End Butcher is a boss that is tailored towards anomaly units, and since it's weak to ice, well, it basically screams for you to use Miyabi. If you manage to get Miyabi, Miyabi is like your free 2 to 3 stars card here. I can get like 2 stars by using solo Miyabi, but for 3 stars, I need to use Miyabi with a support unit to get access to the additional ability. You can use like any anomaly unit here. You can use Jane. Jane has really good dodges and also rewards you by going into the passion state. And you can also use Piper, for example. Piper has some really good dodges, mostly because of the iframes. I can say it's like the best one when it comes to dealing damage or build up. But for iframes, Piper's dodge counter is really good. And the reason you need to use anomaly units here is because the boss has a mechanic that increases the damage they take from anomalies by 50%. This is quite a huge buff, so you need to make use of this if you want to get a lot of damage points. Another reason for you to use anomalies is because you need to remove the ether enhanced state, which reduces the damage you deal to Dead End Butcher and also the days you're going to apply to them. To remove the ether enhanced state, you need to trigger Disorder. So ideally, you want to have like at least 2 anomaly units, maybe Seth and Rina, so you can trigger like Shock and use Jane or any other anomaly units. But yeah, ideally, you want to have 2 different sources of anomaly to get the maximum damage potential. Good units here, for example, is like Jane because of the dodge counter. You can also use Bernice if you want a second source of anomaly without taking too much field time for whatever you're using in the field. And for performance points, you need to dodge like a lot. Now, getting the maximum points using dodge is not that hard because there's a lot of things for you to dodge. What is hard here is for you to actually dodge everything, because there's like too much projectiles on the screen. There's a lot of lasers that are going to spawn from on the field, some really heavy hitting moves, and mainly this one I really hate, the explosion that is going to center on top of you. This one has a really weird timing, so it takes like a lot of practice for you to actually hit the dodge here. So all I can say is try to get like enough damage points as much as you can, and also try to learn all the moves, timing, so you can get some extra performance points. Next up, we have Typhoon Destroyer, and this one is a really weird boss. I don't like Typhoon Destroyer, despite having like some real interesting mechanics, and the reason I don't like it is because it's a robot, which is also weak to electric. And the huge problem here is that if you're using, let's say, for example, Yanagi Seth and Rina, like, you know, a mono electric team, because it's weak to electric, you know. The issue here is that whenever you shock Typhoon Destroyer, it is going to get stunned. And if you stun Typhoon Destroyer, you're basically delaying or messing up with their whole rotation, which means you're probably not going to hit the defensive assist that you need to hit in order to impair and get some extra performance points, also stun and everything. So this boss is a bit harder if you want to maximize your points. For this one, I decided to use Harumasa because he's like a really solid electric unit, but also don't have enough build-up to keep triggering shocks. To trigger shocks, I used MB, so I can try to build up enough shock for the stun window. So during the stun window, I trigger a shock, which is not going to mess up the whole rotation. If you trigger shock in the middle of the rotation, you could just end up like delaying the defensive assist, and this is going to hurt your DPS points, your performance points, everything by a lot. So my personal recommendation is for you to try to apply shock only during the stun window, because this way you're not messing up with anything at all. Doing defensive assists also increases the damage the boss is going to take for chain attacks and ultimates, so try to save your ultimates for the stun window, of course. And for chain attack, well, sadly you need to balance and find yourself a good middle ground, because yeah, by going into a full chain attack, you're going to do increased damage, but for example, Harumasa don't like if you go for a full chain attack. Seth, for example, like, oh my gosh, this is like Sokaku levels of slowness, and I don't recommend you going for Seth chain attack unless you're like using DPS Seth, but this is on you. As for the performance points, you need to impair the enemy, and I think most of us only hit around 2400 performance points, and I have no idea like if you even can get 5000 performance points here. And here, as I said, I don't like using Yanagi because it's too easy for you to trigger shocks on the enemy. I personally highly recommend you try to use Anton or Harumasa. Harumasa, if you can, play around him because, yeah, mechanically speaking, he's quite hard to play. And Anton, if you're at build your Anton, then feel free to use it. But basically, any DPS works here. You don't need to play specifically around electric DPS, okay? Just go for anything here that can deal some really good damage with ultimates and chain attacks, so you can maximize your damage during the stun window. And finally, let's talk about Marionettes in this one. Ooh, this one is not hard, like it's probably one of the easiest one. This one is somewhat hard. And I say this from the point of view that I had to dodge everything because Sokaku and Nicole don't have shields or healing or anything. But anyway, this one is basically just a raw DPS check. There's not too much mechanics. Of course, if you use ice and electric units, you're going to get some increased damage, but you don't need to actually use these attributes here because the enemy has no resistance to anything, and all you need to do is like looking for huge area damage and deal as much damage as you can. If you have like Caesar, for example, Caesar is really good here mostly because of the shield that gives you anti-interrupt levels, and this can help you quite a lot because trust me, dodging Marionettes is such a pain. It's really hard. The camera keeps moving around, they keep dancing around you, and it's just pain. If you have Caesar, feel free to use her right here just because the shield that is going to give you increased anti-interrupt levels, which is really good for you. Outside of it, well, you also need to time some dodges, especially when they get right in the middle of the arena and start throwing a lot of dolls towards you. The more dolls you smash, the higher your ice and electric damage, and this resets after the stun. Try to do the maximum amount of damage before they recover from the stun, otherwise you're going to lose like a lot of ice damage and electric damage potential. If you're not using ice and electric DPS units, then this is somewhat whatever, just focus on dealing as much damage as you can. Actually, on the very first Deadly Assault, I used Harumasa here, and Harumasa is really good because the dash attack can hit both the main Marionette and also the clone. because of the huge area of his dash attack. So if you're not using Haramasu on the second boss, feel free to use here. You're going to get some extra electric damage, and you're also going to kill the clones really easily. I don't recommend you using anomaly units here, because if you try to go for anomaly units, most of the time you're not going to have enough damage to kill the clones. So use like a raw DPS unit, so this way you can kill all the clones, get the maximum performance points, also make your life way easier, because trust me, it's like less things for you to dodge. So raw DPS unit is way better than using anomaly units. Of course, if you have ice DPS units, it's going to work here as well, but the only ice units we have in the game right now is like Lycon, which is a stunner, we have Sokaku, which is a support, but I used her as a DPS here, and also Ellen and Miyabi, which are unlimited units. Miyabi is way better for you to use on the first boss, but if you manage to clear like without using Miyabi on the first boss, you can also use here. Ellen is a little bit sad because, as I mentioned, you need to dodge a lot of things, so you end up messing a lot of her rotation. Highly recommend you to use Caesar here in case you're going for Sokaku DPS or even Ellen, because the anti-interruption levels is going to help you quite a lot. Outside of it, just focus on learning patterns. It is quite hard, like trust me, it is really hard trying to dodge this one. So honestly, I don't have like a lot of tips. It just takes time and practice for you to get around it. But once you learn everything, just focus on dealing as much damage as you can. That's it. Anyway, here are all the builds I used for these clears, and I really hope this video could help you get 2 to 3 stars on most of these boss fights. Let me know in the comments down below how did you fare on this one and which teams you use as well. Feel free to join the Discord server as well. We usually talk about things like this, and I also only decided to make this a guide because I've seen some players asking for help on my Discord server. I was actually only going to post my clears and flex around, but here's a guide for everyone that needs one. Anyway, thanks for watching, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in my next video.